Hey listeners, Keith here. Phew, we made it. It's been another difficult year. Our team wants to say thank you for your commitment to our students and to the profession. We hope that you have space this summer to rest and reinvigorate. Also, we brought in a special guest for this episode. The length of the episode's a bit longer than we would like, but we felt like there was a lot of valuable learning here that we didn't want to cut out. We hope you enjoy it, and we might recommend that you listen to it in 2x, or as Ron calls it, chipmunk mode. Enjoy!
Hello and welcome to episode 8 of For the Purpose Of, the podcast about big trends, big ideas, and exciting news in the world of EdTech, helping you consider the purpose behind your next EdTech integration. I'm Sarah Wood, and I'm joined by my colleagues,
Ron Houtman
And Keith Tramper.
Today, we'd like to welcome Craig Steenstra, who is an Instructional Technology Director in Hudsonville. Craig, could you tell us a little bit about your background and what drives you and a little bit of your current role in Hudsonville?
Sure. Hello, everybody. Good to be here. Thanks for having me. In terms of what drives me professionally, I've always been interested in working with people, connecting with them, supporting them, being a part of growth. In my current role at Hudsonville Public Schools, I get to do that quite a bit in different ways. We started a one-to-one device program last year, so I'm heavily involved in supporting that, training teachers and trying to build our leadership within the district to grow the use of those technologies in our instruction and our processes. Do all kinds of things, wear a ton of hats, help make decisions on tech choices, develop and support various programs, coaching, sharing resources, answering questions. Basically your typical ed tech integration person with a little bit more of the back end admin side.
Yeah, especially the hat part. We know that anytime that you're in a job where you're an ed tech person, they all of a sudden give you a whole new wardrobe of hats. Always happens. It's normal.
For sure. And I'm open to taking on different jobs. I love challenging myself, exploring different avenues this year. I'm the summer school coordinator, so that's new learning for me and something I like because I'll have more direct connection with students. So any opportunity I can be around the actual process of students engaging or teachers engaging, the better. I would like to have more of that.
Okay, so thanks, Craig, for the intro. I'm glad to have you with us today. So today our big topic is protecting our kids. Our normal segment of So Ron, that's the EdTech curmudgeon or things on my brain, some resources around the interwebs, as we call it, and some updates on professional learning opportunities for you. So first thing we're going to start out is our intro question, and it's going to go to Craig first. Craig, what's your earliest memory of using a computer in school?
Yeah, I had to think about this one because I was not really a computer nerd growing up. I'm a late bloomer, you might say. But I definitely remember keyboarding practice in middle school where we had all the computers lined up. There were floppy disks involved. I think the hard cassette kind, not the like flimsy kind. Um, but also, I remember at a couple of my friends' houses that had Carmen Sandiego, which was just amazing and awesome and like addicting to me. That was like early video game crack for me. I'd like get in and I wouldn't talk to my friend. I would just play their Carmen Sandiego game and try to remember what the currency is in Italy, things like that.
The Lyra.
Yeah, the lira. I think
Yeah,
I think you're
there you
right.
go.
Yep.
All
Uh-huh.
right. Okay, Keith, all yours.
I had the fortune in elementary school of having a couple teachers who were very tech savvy, tech forward thinking, who built a computer lab of a whole bunch of, I think they were Apple IIe's, but I remember on those learning how to use HyperCard, which was like a early version of like PowerPoint with some coding kind of built in. It was really interesting. And then, your classics of Simant and Oregon Trail, I think that was like the part of everybody's upbringing. I totally forgot about Carmen Sandiego, but I definitely had some days playing that. So glad you brought that up, Craig.
I even remember when Carmen Sandiego got turned into a TV show for a little hot minute there. Um, well, naturally, I have to go a little bit further back than Keith, in the fact that I had a different school experience. I was at a small private school, and so like we had, anywhere from 2 to 4 kids doubled up on one device, and I couldn't even tell you what it was other than the fact that it was huge. But it did run Oregon Trail, and we spent a lot of time formatting like the real floppy disk, not those hard ones that Craig mentioned, like the real floppy disk. But I really had no clue why we were doing that. But I just remember the teacher like holding like a huge, ginormous stack of these and said, "This is what we're doing today." So I don't know what the plan was for those. Maybe a
You,
side hustle. I don't know.
you know what you were doing. You're you were acting as the labor for them because floppy disk, those 5 1/4 inch, even 3.5, sometimes didn't come formatted, and it always took 10 minutes a piece sometimes to
Yes.
format those. So you were actually saving the teacher's time from having to format disk. So I remember, because I'm like 2 decades older than everybody here, in middle school we had access to a teletypewriter, and if you don't know what that is, it looks like a giant keyboard on these stands. It almost looks like if you think of an old sewing table, like with a big pedal underneath it. So this thing was a pedestal with a teletypewriter on it, and you had a box of paper that would go underneath it using tractor feed. I think even for a while we had roll feed, so it looked like a roll of like the world's worst paper that you might find in a restroom that you use, that terrible brown recycled 20-time paper. That's kind of the paper we used in the teletypewriters. So what we do is a shared time teletypewriter where you talk to a mainframe. So the first thing you had to do is pick up the touch tone telephone, dial the phone number, and then put the handset into a acoustic modem that ran at a blazing 300 baud, or 300 bits per second, crazy fast, and put that in there and get it connected, put in your username and password, and then you could run really small programs using BASIC, and that's what we did. It's a lot of work just to get connected, but it was interesting. And I think back to thinking about Apple IIe's. One of my first jobs that I did this in high school was I don't know how I even got this job. Somebody knew somebody that knew me and suggested it to me. I worked for an audio visual company, and we got a contract in the city of Grand Rapids to install Apple IIe's, but they were weird ones. They were black ones. They were made by Bell and Howell, believe it or not, and to go install those in schools. So you guys may have used one of the Apple IIe's that I installed in a school someplace. Could be. Okay, so we're going to jump into our guest showcase, and we're going to ask our friend Craig just a few questions that we have here, just about Craig's version of For the Purpose Of, which is called, is it called ProTECHting Our Kids? Is that right, Craig?
Yeah, it was actually the name of the series that we wanted to run. The overall program, I guess you could call it, is the Source, and that is spelled SOARCE. So it's kind of in theme with our Hudsonville mascot, the eagle, and we use the SOAR acronym as part of our like PBIS approach. And really, Melissa Bernard, our student services coordinator, Title IX person, she is the one who has overseen that and produced it for years. And really, in terms of what spurred us to move to this direction in the podcast, was that she was not getting much traction on her newsletter. She did a lot of work to produce it and send it out, and wasn't sure how many people were actually reading it. And to try to get information to parents on things like technology, safety, mental health, they had done like parent nights in the past, which were also a lot of work organizing and communicating about, and not many people would show up. So you'd put in hours and hours and hours, and you get like the 12 people who already are responsible and know everything that you're telling them.
I think we're seeing quite a bit of that when you say those things about newsletters and lots of different communication methods. You still get a small amount of the general population to respond to those things. And that's not unique either. We talk about that in our organization quite often about how do you get people to engage with your stuff. And the best that we can always do is produce it in lots of different ways. And share it with people in lots of different ways and hopefully grow it organically. But it's very difficult to get people to read your stuff. But I know it's so easy just to ignore a lot of that stuff, especially when you get, 10, 20, 30, or some of us, hundreds of emails a day.
For sure, yeah. There's so much communication saturation. It's difficult to know how to get through, and we're just exploring different options and trying to adjust to the times, I guess, to some respect. Podcasts seem to like an interesting and reasonable choice because podcasts are pretty popular right now. It's flexible. People can listen to them when they're able to and push play and push stop and, revisit things. And they don't have to read. I think people are adverse to reading, it seems like these days, especially longer chunks of text. So yeah, we thought, well, let's give it a shot, see how it works. And like you were saying, Ron, I think as part of a balanced communication approach, there still are people who want to read or can read or take time to do it. And some things are better communicated, I think, through text as well.
Yeah. When you think about the content, why is the content of the work that you're doing here important to your audience?
Yeah, so a lot of this was driven by Melissa's brain, and she kind of brought me in with my technology, I guess, experience and background and interest. Um, we see both as parents and as professionals in the district just a lot of challenges or potential issues with students using technology. So our first episode was about parental involvement, I guess, but trying to have it be more positive, right? What can parents do to help their students have a healthier relationship with technology? Um, my kids in particular are like screen addicts, and they're always asking for it. Like, can I play on the Switch now? And it's like they're twitching and, and it's just a hard, difficult thing to know, okay, this is what I'm okay with. This is how much I'm okay with. Here are the tools I can use to better monitor it and, help them provide the scaffolds they need to be safe and, reasonable with how they're using their tech. So in addition to that, there's mental issues that we see with our students and challenges with the law, like kids just doing dumb stuff, getting in trouble, and having pretty drastic consequences as a result of it, both within the school discipline setting and with the law setting outside of school.
Yeah, I feel like it's such a complex topic with a lot of gray areas at the moment, and really starting conversations young are super important. As you were talking there, it made me think, was the information that you were putting in your podcast, was that the same stuff that was going in a newsletter as well? Or did you find one or the other was like a better structure for delivering your content?
Yeah, I think it was pretty similar. I'd say the newsletter was more informational, like, hey, here's information or ideas that we're going to share with you. And it's more of a one-way communication, right? Like, we produce this, you ingest it. And there's no like communication or feedback loop involved, which I think was helpful. And I like looking back at some of the newsletters, there's a lot of good stuff that I, as a parent, can benefit from, the reason we were interested in the podcast structure is it gave us an opportunity to be more conversational, to identify experts in the field or people with experience in different areas and get their perspective and thoughts on these topics that we are seeing as challenges in our student population.
I did get a chance to kind of listen through that series that you guys had put out, and I know that you had some other guests, like you just mentioned. Can you talk about, who they were, why you reached out to them, and what that experience was like?
Yeah, for sure. For the mental health episode, we interviewed Dr. Tara Cornelius. She is a psychologist. She is a professor at Grand Valley, and also has a private practice. And she's a Hudsonville resident with kids in the school district. So Melissa had some connection to her, and we just thought for all of those reasons, it would be great to have her because she could talk about the parenting side, the community side, and her experience as a professional. So that was great getting all of those perspectives all in one, conversation. For that one about the law side, we kind of, I forget what we called it, avoiding pitfalls, I think is what we called it. We were put into contact with one of the Ottawa County Sheriff, um, cyber specialists. So somebody who we knew worked regularly in cases where teenagers' phones or computers need to be searched, or where they make like online threats, or a lot of sexually explicit stuff is shared, where they are called in and be like, hey, we need to find everything on your devices to use for this case. So getting her perspective about the cases she sees and just the hard situations that people come into, both as students and their parents. I feel like it made it more tangible, more real, and they were able to give a lot of good advice based on their, experiences.
Yeah. You really did a nice job of kind of offering a lot of different perspectives from people who touch on student internet use in a lot of different ways. And, it was kind of cool to listen to that and see the perspectives, because, when we live in ed tech, we tend to be one perspective on it, but hearing from people in mental health and in law enforcement that touch on this, that's powerful. So kudos to you guys. And I guess just to wrap this up, I'm wondering, what was your biggest takeaway from the experience, and would you do it again?
Yeah, I feel like I learned a lot just preparing for these questions and then listening to what they had to share. Um, from the whole experience of like putting together a podcast, planning and producing it, making it available, it's definitely time intensive. Took a little bit more work and time than I had anticipated, but not terrible. Um, and I do feel like what we produced was a valuable thing for our parents. We set out to, communicate and share things with our uh, families in our community. And the feedback we've gotten has been pretty positive of those who listened. Wish we had more. Um, but I think it was still a worthwhile experience because we made additional connections and provided a meaningful and useful experience for those who did partake.
Well, thank you, Craig. I know we were really looking forward to you joining our podcast today, because we had intended on talking more about student protection in one of our more recent episodes, and we wanted to hold off on it till we got to talk to you. So we wanted to make the big topic today kind of focused around the same kind of concepts that you're talking about, but how, as parents and as educators, are we protecting our kids? And I know you touched a lot on that in the podcast, so we'd love to hear some of your thoughts. And Ron, Sarah, and I will kind of jump in with some other thoughts too.
A big focus of our series, or the theme that kept on coming up, is the importance of having conversations with kids as they grow into their identities with technology, right? So it's not just like, I'm making all these rules. You can't do this. No, 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 no Fortnite. Nah, but making it more of like, hey, here's what I found about this, going back to cognitive coaching, adaptive schools, third point of data. This is what this says about the concerns with privacy and content and inappropriate whatever. These are my concerns. Let's talk about this. Here's our plan. And if you can show that you're responsible enough, then, we can move up or try it out. So things like that. And I think that's even important with like staff too. If we're making decisions that affect what they can or can't use, being transparent about that and sharing the why, and allowing them to request things and provide reasons why too. So I think it works similarly with students and with adults. Being I have an open communication, about practices, and then being flexible to adjust to things as they change.
Yeah, and I think that kind of leads me into some of my thinking when I was thinking about this topic too. Like, I think about what we do in schools, and then I'm a firm believer in learning in general, like telling a story beyond the classroom walls. So, like, what is happening? What do they get excited about that they want to go home and tell their parents about? But I feel like as parents, we're so inundated with all the different kinds of information, like Ron was saying, the 100 emails a day or whatever. Do I really need that Kohl's cash right now, or do I need to focus my attention on somewhere else? Um, but I think having conversations with kids in the fact that, you know, it is serious, it's as serious at home as it is at school, where they think, oh, it's home, it's my safe place. I feel comfortable here, so playing Fortnite is okay to do at home, just completely unrestricted. I think that a lot, um, my own personal experiences and obviously the role that I've served in over the years, like we've had lots of conversations at home with my kids about technology use and things like that, and reminding them no one's perfect, we all make mistakes. And I think having those conversations at home, like I've learned, because I kind of went from like the hammer of Thor approach, like this is what it is, you will stick to this screen time or whatever, but we've really created that environment at home for our kids to say, you know, why, like respectfully ask why, and having that discussion.
Yeah, that open conversation between a parent and a child, or a teacher and a student, or administrator and a student, is so crucial. And you know, Craig, you brought up the third point of data, right? And which is, for those that don't know, it's like, okay, I've got this data about Fortnite, was the example Craig used, right? So here's what the data shows. What do you think of that, child or student? What are your feelings about that? Have you experienced that? Opening that door for kids to talk about their experiences is really important, but then also to, you know, set yourself up as somebody who's curious and is wondering about their experiences and is concerned, you know, too. So that, like Sarah said, you don't have to be the hammer of Thor. Mjolnir, by the way. Um, you knew by bringing up Thor, I was going to say something about Marvel.
I
Marvel,
know, and I'm not into that world. I was just baiting you with that.
but yeah, you don't always have to be the heavy hand. And I know that's like, as a educator, and you're sitting in a room of 20 to 30 students, sometimes more, that are all on devices. It's so easy to think like, okay, I have to eliminate this threat. Like, I got to take the device away. I've got to have that kid take a time out from it. They lost it for a day. Which, you know, sometimes that's reasonable. But it's so much more difficult to open up that conversation with students, but it goes so much further. So highly suggest that. And, you know, just on the parent side of things, there's a tool called the Smart Talk that I came across a few years ago. I think it came up at a showing of Screenagers, which is a documentary about teens social media use. But the Smart Talk is a website that walks you through um, basically a contract between you and your child. And it brings up all the different like topics that are pertinent to what students are going through and children are going through right now with the internet. So safety and privacy, screen time, social media and respect, apps and downloads, and then texting and calling. So it gives you those third points of data to bring up and to have a open conversation and dialogue with your kids. And in the end, you know, you sit down at a computer with your kid and walk through this. In the end, it has a, you know, contract that's completed that you could print out and hang up, or, you know, refer back to when something doesn't go the way that you thought it would go. So just a great tool, not the end all be all of everything, but a great way to kind of open that conversation up and be productive with it.
So just thinking about that contract, you know, that's one of the things I think about also is, you know, if we're struggling with a student, there's a bunch of layers here, obviously. So there's technology usage. You know, the jury is still out on, is too much screen time bad for kids. Because I would submit to you, there are a lot of kids around you and us that are voracious readers, and we would never think about snatching books out of their little hands, right? But on the other hand, there's voracious readers of the internet. And can you put a value judgment on one versus the other if they're just reading? If I'm reading online or if I'm reading a book? That's the thing that's always interesting to me is, again, we would never just go snatch, a book out of a kid's hand. Stop reading. But we're really quick to say, take away your Chromebook because you're reading. That one just strikes me sometimes as a little interesting. We talked about in our last podcast a book that I mentioned too, and we start thinking about our kids. It's called Stolen Focus: Why You Can't Pay Attention and How to Think Deeply Again, by Jonathan Hari. And if you've not come across that book, it's a really great book to get your brain wrapped around how all these mechanisms work for taking away. I mean, they're built for engagement. All of these different social media places, the games that they play, they're all built for engagement. They're to give you the dopamine hit every 10 seconds or so your brain keeps wanting more and more and more of it. So that's one of the things I think about a lot. How might we help our kids understand their technology usage? And I have to tell Sarah this. I saw this the other day while I was driving on my detour route. I made a note of this because I knew we were going to talk about it. Driving down a street where the 9th through 12th graders were ready to get on the bus. And, I'm driving the 25 mile an hour speed limit, and there's a line of 11 kids on one side of the street. And I encounter another group all in line for the bus. None of them were talking to each other. They were all looking at their phones. And I was trying to remember back in the day, before we had these attention grabber thingies, that we would just, we'd be talking to each other. I didn't see that. I know this was just a teeny weeny little glimpse, one anecdote, but it really struck me that these kids are lined up together in person outdoors, and they're still just all standing there like looking down at the ground in their phones. I don't know if you've seen that too, Sarah.
I have a feeling I know which bus pickup area you're referring to. And the thing that strikes me about that too, which I didn't think about till now, is that there are always cars with parents in there waiting as well, parked along the street, waiting for their kids to get picked up, where I'm like, I don't even see parents interacting with students. And I'm like, yes, I'm probably that awkward parent that drives my kids nuts, but I'm like, I'm going to sit there and talk to their friends, get to know them, and see who they're interacting with. But yeah, it's interesting. Like, I could tell you what the top of their heads look like and what kind of haircut they might have, but facial recognition, I've got nothing.
Yeah. So I think, down the road with this, there's still a lot of things that we can do within, if we call it education technology, or helping within our schools, just to have kids think about their technology use. So one of them is, that behavior contract, which I agree with is a good thing to do as a parent, to make sure that if rules are broken, that there is some accountability mechanism for them to do that. And, it's great to have a signed contract where you say, it says this, you did this, this means this, right? But the other bigger parts, I don't think our kids really have a very good understanding at their current level of development about the long-term implications about them sharing things online, especially every random thought they might have, putting it on TikTok, thinking that, as a 14-year-old, I know how the world works already, and making a statement that might come back to haunt them later. I often said to students too that your digital footprint that you're leaving behind is perhaps something that you're not going to be proud of sharing. And further, if you just think about down the road, there's been thousands of things that we can talk about case-wise that I don't think a lot of our kids can actually run for public office, to be honest with you. Because stuff is going to come back. And yeah, we should give forgiveness to kids making minor indiscretions about perhaps the words they used were not articulate. They weren't the best way to say something. And I don't think we should hold people accountable, but we're just not there yet as a society. It's just, your stuff is going to come back and wash over you again. So
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that though too, because one thing I've tried to politely do with my kids is kind of insert myself into their screen time, not where like I'm hawking over them being a helicopter parent, but trying to engage them in conversation as they're having their screen time. I really could not tell you much about Fortnite other than I like to call myself the mullet marauder at home because it annoys my son. Um, but those kinds of things. But even just doing that, it's engaging them in conversation about what they're doing, and then my son will start telling me, oh, I did this. Let me show you this. And so he's bringing me into his screen world voluntarily. So we do that. And another one that they've really been big on lately, both my kids, kind of surprisingly, is Darman. And well produced videos always have a great message, but just hearing the conversation that my kids have, because some of it is like blatantly like, are you kidding me? And so I'll be like, well, why did you respond that way? And they'll be like, well, you know what, and then they go through and see things. And so I try and make connections between their reactions in the video and kind of what Craig had started with it, that third point. Well, why do you think that? Or would we feel this way in our house? How about this person over there? Would they say the same kind of thing? And trying to just get snippets of their online world. It probably annoys them. I'm well aware of that, and I welcome that. I'm very comfortable in their uncomfort with that. But yeah.
well, you're pushing into them a good thing that they should have as a lifelong skill, which is metacognition, right? They should have the ability to think about their thinking instead of being like what we see many times. Kids are very reactionary, and they just react to things, the first thing that comes into your head, versus thinking about any long-term effects of these things. Just thinking about your thinking. That's a key skill in being a great learner, is the ability to think about your thinking. And
I'm always like, what about the E words? And they're like, oh, the E
uh,
words. And they'll go, yep, empathy and executive functioning.
yeah. Dang, I hate having a teacher for a mom.
I know sometimes I hear that too.
That was one of the points I wanted to touch on too, is just mindfulness in general for adults and for kids, and intention with our tech use. Like being aware of what we're doing and when we're doing it, and what messages that's sharing or sending. I think it's easy as adults, especially, to get into the habit of just like, okay, I got some free time, scroll, 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 scroll. And then kids see that, right? What is that telling them? And what kind of mental impact is that having on us if we're just like looking at other people's lives or other things without really any intention in what we're trying to accomplish? And so that's what I'm trying to instill in my kids and myself, really. Like, if I'm taking out my phone, what is my purpose? Am I going to accomplish something with this? Am I looking something up? If I'm going to like check out Facebook, is it because I want to connect with somebody specifically? Or if I'm just going to be like, and then sit there with my tongue hanging out for a while and then feel bad about how miserable my life is compared to the cool stuff that other people are doing.
It's like when you go to the restaurant, everybody pulls out their phone and doesn't talk to each other. We're here together, people.
Yeah.
Why are we all here?
Or are you trying to prove a point to your teachers growing up when they said, you'll never have a calculator in your pocket all the time?
Oh, yes, I will.
Look at me now.
Yeah.
Have you ever wondered why some robots are insecure? I bet it's because their intelligence is somewhat artificial. One thing you do not need to be insecure about is how the Ken ISD EdTech team can support you in a variety of ways to meet your individual needs. No jokes or artificial intelligence, the Ken ISD EdTech team is ready to help you with coaching, finding resources, professional learning, and so much more. Simply visit bit.ly/IamEdTech. That is bit.ly/IamEdTech, all smushed together, for more information and to connect with the team of consultants who are ready to serve you. Once again, that website is bit.ly/IamEdTech.
Hello, EdTech curmudgeon.
All right, welcome back. So, this past weekend, a lot of us had a long weekend, and I was even able to sneak an extra day in there myself as I had one more mental health day that was granted to us that I could use before the end of the month. And so I was just sitting outside enjoying a cup of coffee, and it was just a good time to sit and reflect. We had nice weather, and I feel like last week we were just pummeled with all the things in all the ways. And it just really got me reflecting on a lot of the things that we've already discussed here in my own kids too. Like, how can I keep my kids safe when they're not with me? And I feel like that's an ongoing personal question that a lot of parents are always grappling with. And I knew this was going to be something that Ron would have information or thoughts to share on too.
So, Ron,
So,
what do you think
Ron.
about the surveillance society that we might be living in with regard to our kids? So, the reason this is interesting, it goes with this whole entire topic of, if you want to call it digital citizenship or technology usage. One of the things that we're kind of training our kids into is being under constant surveillance. And I alluded to this earlier, that our students, our kids, can't make the same mistakes that we made when we were growing up. Now, if they make a mistake online, that becomes part of their permanent digital record someplace forever. Uh, in the olden days, when I screwed up in some way, it'd have to be pretty extreme, and might make the newspaper, and that would last for about a week or so and it'd disappear, or it would just be word of mouth from one place to another. Nowadays, everybody, if there's some sort of drama somewhere, the phones are the first thing to be whipped out to be recorded, for your posterity forever, can be used against you. We're not really giving our kids a lot of space to, I would say, again, just make mistakes. And that's one of those things we think about nowadays with a lot of other applications that are being added to students' take home devices. Now, I'm not going to make a value judgment about this. This is mostly just thinking about this is, at what point does student supervision of their online activities start and stop? So I would agree that with let's just take the case of a student gets a Chromebook from school or another device. The law says that we have to filter the one type of content, basically objectionable content. That's all it says, while they're at school, only for the purpose of getting E-rate reimbursement money. That's it. If you were a school and you didn't get E-rate, you don't even have to filter kids' devices. But we already know demands of parents are going to say, yes, you will filter those devices. So there's that first level. The next one is we're seeing quite a bit of these applications that are being sold by companies on a subscription basis. And by the way, they're really expensive per kid. Sometimes they're like $7 to $10 to $14 per kid per year to do keyword searches. So if students are emailing each other, it'll look for objectionable words or words that might trigger some sort of investigation of some sort. So if they use words like shoot or guns or bombs or kill, those words will trigger the system to then send an email or notification to somebody. Again, not saying that's a bad thing when we're thinking about the current environment that we live in, where we're seeing, horrific school shootings that are occurring. It'd be great to be able to monitor all the traffic of everybody all the time to be able to prevent those things. But there's got to be a balance here someplace too when we think about how and who are going to be responsible for these things. So school districts are feeling really responsible for the lives of students 24/7, 365. I just wonder too, down the road, does this look like a surveillance state? Do we really want to go there? What sort of Fourth Amendment protections might our students have for the unreasonable search and seizure of one's property and possessions and things? So there's a lot to think about. I think schools really need to instead of just letting IT turn this on and just say, okay, here it is. I think there needs to be a ton of conversation around this about the implications of releasing, what students are doing out of their school time back to their school. We've already seen a few interesting court cases, probably from 4 or 5 years ago, where one district in Pennsylvania, they were monitoring the webcams of students while they were off campus. And you can just imagine what's going through your head really quick. Is that a really good idea for a school to get involved in that? At the end of the legal decision, the answer was absolutely not, and you owe people a whole heck of a lot of money for invading their privacy. So there's a lot of balance I think we need to do here. And the other one would be who's responsible for monitoring. If it's the IT department, that's the wrong answer. An IT department has way too much stuff to do. So again, developing a policy that says, yeah, we're going to enact a system like this that does look at keywords, but the person responsible for doing any behavioral analysis of this needs to be, if it's the assistant superintendent, dean of students, principal, that's their job, counselors. But then the other part of this is if you miss something, who's liable for that? So you opened up this huge Pandora's box of, we're going to do this thing, but now you're held accountable to all that stuff.
Based on our last episode where we talked about a little bit of like the hacking side of things and keeping that information safe, when you've got, essentially keyloggers that are watching everything that kids say and do, and that data gets into the wrong hands, I wonder where that goes. And like you said, Ron, who's liable for that? And what concerns does that put into our heads about what our students are potentially going to be subjected to because of that?
There's two kinds of data. There's data that hasn't been breached, and then there's data that will be breached, and it all ends up to be the latter. Especially everything's cloud-based, that they're every day. I mean, all I have to do is look up that website, have I been pwned, and I can see how many times that data has been breached. And it's back to kind of when you're vetting even applications, these extensions, you really have no real way of telling what sort of personally identifiable information is being transmitted to these providers. They claim safe harbor and they say, hey, this is what we're collecting is basically the device that they're on, the time they used it, maybe the geographical location, but that's it. But you really don't know unless you really get into doing full logging of all the traffic going between your place and someplace else. And frankly, ain't nobody got time for that. There's just no way that we're going to do that. So we just trust. We trust that when a company says something that they're going to do something. I don't know about you guys, but I don't trust Facebook. I don't trust Instagram. I don't trust YouTube. So we have to really think about how much are we willing to give up of our who we are, our person, our basically our basic activity to faceless, nameless corporations that use our data and sell those to people. Again, it's that old saying that if it's free, you're the product.
Well, thank you for sharing your thoughts there, Ron. And we joke about some of these things as far as like, so Ron, because you have opinions on things, but I honestly love listening to when you share your thoughts on these things because it always makes me think differently about the topic that we're discussing or things that are going on. So I appreciate that. So with that being said, we're going to move into sharing around the interwebs. Ron, what has been your latest fun thing that you've discovered?
Oh, there's so many things on the internet that are absolutely the best thing ever. So one of the ones that I found just by accident, I guess, or I'm reading in Google, this is really kind of like the Google part of things. Google just changed this. They have now the ability, if you're editing a document, you can now multiply select different text elements. So I'll lay this out for you because it's a podcast and it's hard to visualize this. Let's say that you've got 5 sentences and you want to bold just the first 2 words of each one of those sentences. You can now in Google Docs control and click and drag to select multiple short pieces of text or lots of text and then apply formatting to all those simultaneously. So this is a brand new thing where you can do, they call it multiple text block formatting, which is really helpful if you're doing any large amount of editing of a document. My writing process is I don't format anything first. If I'm going to write a longer form something, I write all the text out and then I go and edit it. And this makes things so much easier, and it helps our kids out a lot too when they're trying to, for example, they have to add subject headings to things, but it's a really neat thing. And the second one that I saw, and you may have been getting notified this in your Google Drive, is that you can now Control C for copy and Control V for paste files in Google Drive. So if you're in Google Drive, you can find a file you need to move from one place to another. You can just Control C it, select it, Control C, go to the directory where you want to drop it and do Control V, paste. Or if you're on a Mac, Command V and Command C, and that'll move that file for you. I thought that was slick, and it's way overdue because that's just the way that we've always done things in regular operating systems. So it's nice to see that in Chrome.
If I can comment on that, that actually addresses an issue we've been having, or a challenge we've been having with shared drives. So in some of our departments, teachers would create a copy of a file in the shared drive, right? So it's like a common assessment or an assignment. And if you're a content manager in the shared drive, you make a copy of that file. It makes a copy in that shared drive, and you end up with 8 million copies of the same thing. You can, if you like go to the file and then go to the file menu, make a copy, then you can choose to save it in your drive, right, wherever you want to. But that was a huge pain in the butt. So if they can just do the Command or Control C, Control V, that makes it a heck of a lot easier.
Yeah, it's really nice. I've been in those drives, copy of copy of copy of copy. Those are my favorite ones.
I feel like people around the world had little desk parties when that was announced.
Yeah, right. Sarah?
It's not necessarily new. I think it started back in February, but the Teach with Chrome series that Google put out was really kind of awesome. I attended some of the live webinars, and then usually within a week or so, they would release the slide decks that they had. One in particular that stood out to me, and ironically, it fit really well with the conversation that we've been having, was their SEL and Chrome series that they did, and how they went through different supports that you can do for SEL that were aligned with the Castle framework, and then specific tools. And it just brought out a point that I hadn't necessarily considered, I guess, in regards to SEL and how technology is being used, as far as how AI can be leveraged in this. And so one of the tools that they mentioned was WYSA, WYSA, and they have an app, and you can do a little demo online. So I intentionally did not explore it until I had one of those moments where I could not wrap my head around someone else's thinking, and I was feeling really frustrated. And so then I went to that, and it was honestly very interesting. And I think the biggest thing that it did was it provided me a distraction and a redirection in my thinking, because after going through having this conversation, I guess you'd say, with this AI robot, I was like, yeah, I mean, it wasn't that bad. I'm still a little annoyed, but I'm not nearly as frustrated as I was before. So it just made me think, like, how might students react to having that tool if they know they can do some self-regulation, but they just need the time and space to do that, and they need something beyond a fidget in their hand to help them do that. It was just really neat.
It's somewhat, that WYSA app reminds me of an app called Wobot, which is like an AI therapist, essentially. And it, they reviewed it on a podcast called Should This Exist? And it's a really cool, I guess, take on how AI can impact mental health. So pretty cool. Thanks, Sarah. The thing I'm going to share this month is Modern Classroom Project. The Modern Classroom Project is essentially a free course that you can walk through that concretely spells out what blended learning looks like, what mastery-based learning looks like, and self-pacing looks like in a classroom. I think these are all topics that we've explored at Ken ISD, but the thing about this website and this course is they put it together in a nice packaged format that is easy to comprehend and is approachable. Like, it doesn't feel like a huge lift to move to essentially personalized learning and blended learning in your classroom. So worth checking out. We're talking about it around the state, and I think we'll see something come to our area eventually around the Modern Classroom project. So keep your eyes open for that, and we'll let you know on the podcast if that comes up.
Nice. Thanks for sharing all those, guys. That's interesting. I continue to learn from and with you. The one that I actually don't have any experience with, but just heard about recently is called Clubhouse. And it's defined as a social audio app. So my understanding is you load the app and then you find people who are talking about topics in which you're interested. I think you can make like private rooms and then schedule times and invite people in. So it was mentioned to me at a recent like teacher gathering, and the person said they've been using it to talk EDU with people and get different perspectives on things. So I'm just kind of curious as to where that might go and what the potential of that could be. It kind of reminds me of, what was the audio app that people would have asynchronous conversations with? What was that called again?
Was it Voxer?
Voxer, that's it.
Oh,
Voxer.
Have you guys have you checked out Clubhouse or tried it?
Yeah, I remember checking it out, and it's kind of like an interactive podcast, right? Like you have a set topic, and there's usually like a speaker that kind of kicks it off, and then they promote you to a participant if you want to, have something to say or, open dialogue about other things. So,
all right, we have some opportunities for you.
Yeah, just a couple. Coming up, we have our virtual make and take for the summer, which is just 3 different topics on those. We have learning roadmaps, animated GIFs, and classroom cribs. So you can sign up. That all those things need to be turned in by the end of August. So even if you signed up on August 15th, you could still go ahead and complete and get 3 sketches for that. Our PL in a box has filled up, and we have a wait list going.
Wait, you filled up the PL in a box?
We filled up the PL in a box.
What did you fill the box up with?
People.
Lots of crinkle fill.
Got it.
Keith and I had a little packing party yesterday. That was lots of fun. And then fresh off the hot Learning Stream press this morning, we have a Digital Age Teaching for English Learners book study coming up, and that's all about like a guide to equitable learning for all students. And I will be running that with Christy Gilbert, who is a language and literacy coach at Kent ISD.
And Design Thinking PDX is coming back. It actually just started yesterday, the most recent cohort of it. That is the newsletter PD. Essentially, it comes to your inbox with some videos or articles to consider, and you get to choose how you want to interact with it. So something to check out if you'd like to get involved.
And finally, you can find all of our EdTech offerings at bit.ly/IamEdTech, and that is bit.ly/IAMEDTECH, all lowercase, all smashed together.
And that's it for this episode of For the Purpose of podcast. We'd like to give a huge thank you to Craig Steenstra for joining us today and sharing your experience and expertise with our audience. If people want to get a hold of you, where can they find you?
Well, you can just Google me. I think I'm the only Craig Steenstra that exists in the world based on my Google searches. But my Twitter handle is @csteenst. So that's CSTEENST. And my email at Hudsonville is the same handle @hpseagles.net. And yeah, I'd be open to connecting with anyone. And if you wanted to check out the podcast series, the Protecting Our Kids, you can look at the Hudsonville Public Schools website and look for the Source podcast series.
And to our listeners out there, we want to know what you do to protect your students and families. So we would like to extend an invitation to you to share your resources and strategies with us at edtech@kentisd.org or by heading to bit.ly/IamEdTech. To get more information, links to the things we discussed today, and pictures of Ron's hat, check out the show notes. Please take a minute to like and subscribe and share it with a friend. And we will catch you next time on For the Purpose of. This podcast is a service of Kent ISD. It is produced by Ron Houtman, Sarah Wood, and Keith Tramper. Our theme music is Neon Lights by Scott Holmes Music, courtesy of freemusicarchive.org. Our ad music is Vienna Beat by Blue Dot Sessions.
For me, I'd like get in and I wouldn't talk to my friend. I would just play their Carmen Sandiego game.
Where in the world is
Ron, Keith, and Sarah.